Hello, welcome. Hope you guys had a good week. This week we're going to be reading chapters 1 through 3, and in this section of the book we're focusing on knowing your organization, understanding the need, and designing your project. Too often, organizations jump into writing a grant before the organization is truly grant ready. Grant writing is time and resource intensive, so it is important to first ensure your organization is ready to meet the challenge. By doing the work on the front end to make sure your organization is ready, you are more likely to be successful in receiving the grant. When looking at organizational readiness, first you should review your organization's mission statement. Your mission statement should align with the mission of the funder. Funders do not like to see mission creep or mission drift, which is when organizations change their mission just to get funding. Secondly, you'll have to assess how well your organization will be able to articulate the need for your project and how well your organization will be able to meet that need. You will need to identify who will benefit from your project and identify both the direct and indirect beneficiaries. Your organization should have a strong strategic plan. The strategic plan indicates to the funder that you have done some planning and are capable of carrying out the project. You will need to consider your leadership. Funders want to see strong leadership who are held accountable. They also like to see an involved board who also contributes financially to the organization, since personal financial contributions show that the board believes in the organization and the project. Your organization should have a strong, clear budget that indicates different funding sources and expenses. You should be able to show that the organization has sound accounting practices in place. As a personal example, I was working with a partner organization and we were collaborating on a grant. The organization did not have a clear project budget, it was unclear where the money was coming from and where it was going, and they did not have a system in place to monitor expenses. We decided that Nebraska Methodist College would be the party responsible for financial management of the grant because we could show the funder that we had sound accounting practices. You also need to make sure that you have buy-in from everyone at the organization, as well as identify potential collaborators. Funders want to see collaboration. It can expand the reach and ensure that you're not duplicating efforts. You should also take time to evaluate your organization's strengths and show how your strengths make you uniquely capable to run the project. Reflect on your reputation in the community. If you have recently had negative press, think about how you will address this to your funder. Also, consider how quickly your organization can make decisions and respond to issues. Funders want to see organizations that are prepared to respond in crises and have plans in place. What is the infrastructure at your organization? Do you have the technology, the space, the people, and the systems in place to apply for the grant? Lastly, make sure you are eligible. If you have to have 501(c) status as a nonprofit, make sure you have the paperwork. Sometimes funders also require other components for eligibility. For example, for a nursing school to receive a grant, they may need to show that they are accredited. Know that you have assessed the organization and have decided that the organization is ready to apply for a grant. You need to turn your attention to the need. The need shapes the proposal, and the more clear you are when articulating the need, the more compelling your grant application, and the grant writing process is easier. You need to make sure that you are able to explain to the funder what your purpose is and why what you do is so important. First, you need to assess the need. This usually requires research. Find out statistics on the problem, find out what other people are doing on the issue, review needs assessments that have already been conducted in your community. If there is no research on a particular issue in your community, you may need to conduct your own needs assessment or conduct focus groups to find out what the true need is. As a personal example, I'm a member of a team of faculty at Nebraska Methodist College, and we wanted to do something about obesity in the community. To find out what people wanted and needed, we conducted focus groups before implementing our project. This is a crucial first step. Second, you need to clarify who is affected by this problem. It can be helpful to have a group of people brainstorming because there are often layers and additional people who are affected indirectly that you might not have thought of. Next, you need to identify the root causes. What factors contribute to this problem? There are often many factors, but in your project, you may just select one or two of these factors to work on. You will need to measure the scope of the problem. The issue might have a global or national dimension, but you will need to narrow down to the level where you can actually do something. For example, you might be interested in hunger. Hunger is a global problem, but you might decide that your scope is working on hunger in one rural community in Nebraska. Then you need to find out what others are doing. Funders might ask you this directly in one of the questions on their application, but even if they don't, you should be able to explain how your project fits in with other work being done on the issue and why your project is also necessary. Lastly, you'll need to explain what the long-term implications are if nothing is done. If your project doesn't happen, what will be the result? Some projects aren't directly addressing a problem. For example, a museum or art project may not be an answer to a problem, but rather an opportunity. So in this case, you'll want to explain what would be missing if your project didn't exist. What would the community be missing out on? Ultimately, the need drives everything. It impacts who you ask for money, what type of grant you seek, the activities you propose, who your partners are, what your outcomes are, and how you measure success. A strong proposal needs to have a compelling need statement, which starts with being able to identify the need clearly. The final chapter from this week looks at what to consider when designing your project. Next week we will talk about the actual grant writing process and each component of the grant proposal. But first, you need to think about your project design. The project design must be aligned with the need, as we just discussed, but also the community and your organization. You need to show how your project will impact the community. Therefore, you will need to understand your community and show that you know what the community needs. Next, you need to show how the project aligns with your organization's mission. Again, being conscious of avoiding mission drift. Next, you need to relate this project to other work your organization is doing. How will this project interact with other projects, and is this project a good use of your organization's resources? You should also consider the timeliness of your project. Is this project responding to issues in the community that need immediate attention? For example, rates of sexually transmitted diseases in Omaha are the highest in the nation. There has been a lot of attention on this issue recently. This would be a good time to address this issue and seek funding to work on this issue. You also need to think about whether or not your organization has the capacity to carry out the grant and if the benefits of the grant outweigh the costs. It is important to ensure that others in your organization are committed. If only 1 or 2 people are interested in this grant opportunity, the project will suffer, even if you do get the grant, because others will not be on board. Lastly, you need to make sure your collaborators are on board and also interested in this project. Next, you need to decide on your approach. There are many different ways to approach an issue, so when considering your approach, it is helpful to look at your goals first. What do you want to accomplish? Then, consider what approach or strategy would be best to achieve this goal. You can use prior experience or research to determine what the best approach might be. Then, you want to decide on your methods. Which processes will you use within your strategy? Next, what specific activities will you use? Once you know your strategy, methods, and activities, you will determine your outputs. What are the quantifiable services that you will provide? For example, one output might be providing 1,000 free flu shots to individuals without health insurance. Then consider your outcomes. What behavior or attitude do you want to change? Using this example, an outcome might be there will be a 10% decrease in the number of flu cases in Douglas County. Be sure to look at the research for best practices regarding activities and strategies. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Next, you need to anticipate the results. What are you going to accomplish and how will you measure the success? It is important to have baseline data so that you can show a change. If you don't know how many individuals have an STD in Douglas County now, you won't be able to assess if the numbers decreased after your project. A logic model can be very helpful in planning your project design, which we'll talk about in more detail later in the semester. There are lots of examples of logic models, but most include the following 5 components: resources, activities, outputs, outcomes, and goals. The resources include what you will need to carry out the project, such as the building or space, the staff, the operational costs, and the equipment. Then you'll need to explain the specific activities that will be carried out as part of the project. For an example, for an after-school program, the activities might include tutoring, mentors, and an art class. Next, you will include your outputs. These are the quantifiable services you will provide. Usually, these are the things that you're asking money for. Next, you explain the outcomes. What is the measurable change that will occur because of your program? Lastly, you state the overall goal. What is the effect of these outcomes? For example, the outcome might be a 10% decrease in flu cases, but the goal would be a healthier community. One way to help develop outcomes and goals is to use a so that chain. You start with an activity. You start with one of your activities, and then after that activity say, so that. From this exercise, you can identify what your outcomes and goals are. Here's an example. We provide diabetes prevention education so that individuals will know the behaviors that can lead to diabetes, so that individuals will engage in behaviors such as healthy eating and exercise to prevent diabetes, so that there is a decrease in the number of diabetes, so that there are lower health complications, so that the community is healthier and healthcare costs are lower. It may be helpful to do this exercise with a group of people to get ideas. It ultimately helps you see how your activities are leading you towards your overall goals and mission. Each week at the end of my PowerPoint, I'll give an overview of what you should be working on this week. Here are the assignments for this week. You have 2 discussion board posts, and then you should respond to both. You should provide at least 2 replies to each of those discussion boards. And then you have 2 assignments, and both of those are due on Sunday. As always, let me know if you have any questions.